I know a lot of people have been comparing Trump to Hitler lately, but there's some major differences between. For instance, Hitler was married to a woman who loved him.
They're poisoning the blood of our country.
It's sick. It's wrong. And the Republican Party is defending it.
You know, we've hit peak political absurdity when comparing modern American politics to historical fascism isn't even the most ridiculous part of our national conversation anymore. It's absolutely wild that we're sitting here in the 2020s watching a former president practically writing love letters to authoritarian legacies, while everyone else is desperately trying to remember if this is what normal politics used to look like. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The sheer audacity of the situation would be comedic if it weren't so deeply concerning. Here we are, decades after World War II, having to explain why admiring dictators might not be the best look for someone who once held the highest office in the land. Every living former president is probably getting treatment for chronic facepalming at this point. Remember when presidents used to unanimously agree that Nazis were bad? Those were simpler times, weren't they? What's particularly mind-bending is this new trend of historical revisionism wrapped in a bow of both sides' rhetoric. We've gone from never forget to, well, maybe there were some good things faster than you can say constitutional crisis. The bar for presidential behavior has dropped so low it's practically a tripping hazard.
Recently, there was something else every president since World War II had in common. They all saw Adolf Hitler.
We're talking about a man who's apparently been collecting authoritarian trading cards like they're Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. From Kim Jong-un to Putin, with some vintage Hitler appreciation thrown in for good measure. The most surreal part? This isn't just some fringe political sideshow anymore. We're watching major political figures and entire party establishments either defending or tap dancing around statements that would have ended careers faster than a New York Minute just a few years ago. The political compass has gotten so twisted that basic statements like democracy is good and dictators are bad have somehow become controversial talking points. Let's take a moment to appreciate the spectacular irony of it all. For decades, American presidents have stood as symbols of democratic values, champions of human rights, and stern opponents of authoritarian regimes. Now we're witnessing what happens when that script gets flipped and thrown into a blender with a healthy dose of reality TV drama.
After 80 years of presidents who despise Nazism, Donald Trump became the first one to...
It's like watching a political version of The Twilight Zone, where the plot twist is that we're living in it. The real kicker is how this bizarre political theater has normalized the previously unthinkable. We've reached a point where expressing admiration for historical dictators barely raises eyebrows anymore. The news cycle has become so saturated with increasingly outrageous statements that we're practically numb to it. Remember when Klepper was considered a major presidential gaffe? Those were the days. And yet, here we are, watching as the boundaries between political satire and reality become increasingly blurred. Comedians don't even need to write jokes anymore. They just need to read headlines verbatim. The punchlines write themselves when you have a former president who seems to be working his way through a dictator appreciation checklist like it's some kind of autocrat book club.
Poisoning the blood of our country.
It's sick. It's wrong. And the Republican Party is defending.
The most troubling part isn't even the statements themselves. It's the way they've been absorbed into our political discourse as just another day in American politics. We've somehow slid from this is unprecedented to this is unfortunate to this is just Thursday.
I know a lot of people have been comparing Trump to Hitler lately, but there's some major differences between. For instance, Hitler was married to a woman who loved him.
The normalization of the extreme has become our new normal, and that's perhaps the most dangerous development of all. The whole situation serves as a stark reminder of how quickly political norms can erode when we stop being shocked by the shocking. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of political amnesia and the importance of maintaining clear, unwavering standards for our leaders, regardless of party affiliation or political convenience. Maybe it's time to raise the bar back up from doesn't actively admire dictators to something a bit more ambitious, like actually understands and respects democratic institutions. In an unprecedented display of presidential behavior, we're witnessing quite a spectacle unfold. The catalyst? A powerful advertisement from the Lincoln Project that's causing quite a stir in political circles. What's particularly fascinating is how this video managed to provoke such an intense reaction from the former president. The advertisement masterfully weaves together a narrative that breaks new ground in political messaging. It highlights a disturbing moment. After 8 decades of American presidents who stood firmly against Nazi ideology, we witnessed something something unprecedented, praise for such ideologies from a former president. The video's composition is particularly striking, blending historical footage with recent statements, all underscored by ominous musical elements that create an unsettling atmosphere. What makes this situation even more remarkable is the former president's response. His reaction mirrors what one might expect from someone much younger. Imagine a toddler's tantrum, but coming from a 77-year-old former world leader with aspirations to return to office. The response has been nothing short of a digital explosion, with social media platforms becoming the battleground for an unprecedented display of emotional outbursts. The advertisement's impact was amplified by its unflinching approach. The Lincoln Project didn't soften their message or employ subtle hints. They presented their concerns about statements regarding poisoning the blood of our country directly, while highlighting how certain political figures have defended such rhetoric. What's particularly intriguing is how this whole scenario has evolved into something larger than just political discourse. It's become a showcase of how modern communication platforms can amplify emotional responses. The resulting social media storm, complete with its unique blend of unconventional capitalization and alternative narratives, provides a fascinating glimpse into modern political communication. The aftermath has been especially noteworthy. Imagine someone typing faster than their thoughts can form, leading to a cascade of messages that would make even the most patient observer raise an eyebrow. Some observers have drawn historical comparisons.
I don't know who I'm going to vote for. I'm definitely not going to vote for Trump because I think that he's projecting very complex problems onto simple villains. I don't hide from that. I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans.
Though these often miss crucial nuances and differences in historical contexts, the entire episode serves as a remarkable case study in modern political communication, emotional responses to criticism, and the power of provocative political advertising. It's particularly telling how a single advertisement could trigger such an extensive and intense reaction, suggesting deeper implications about the current state of political discourse and personal resilience to criticism in the public sphere.
God said, I need a corrupt man who is above the law and immune from justice. So God made a dictator.
We're witnessing an interesting phenomenon in political communication where a former president repeatedly emphasizes his legal challenges. The repetitive use of the word indicted in his communications creates an almost rhythmic pattern of protest. Imagine someone saying, I've been indicted so many times it begins to lose its meaning, like a word repeated too often.
Trump seemingly unable to get through a single interview or a rally without echoing Hitler's rhetoric on immigration, Trump again with they have poisoned our country.
It's the single biggest problem. They've poisoned our country. They're coming in from prisons. They're coming in from mental institutions.
He just can't get through a single one without invoking horrifying World War II era rhetoric.
What makes the situation particularly noteworthy is his claim of being correct 99% of the time. This assertion comes alongside complaints about fact-checkers examining his statements, creating an interesting contradiction. It's reminiscent of someone insisting the sky matches their preferred color palette while dismissing anyone who might suggest otherwise. The narrative takes an unexpected turn when we consider his comments about world leaders with authoritarian tendencies. But perhaps the most striking element is his unique approach to political criticism, particularly his use of vegetable-based metaphors when discussing his political rival, President Biden. One might suggest that focusing on policy discussions might be more constructive than such comparisons. The discourse then ventures into truly unexpected territory with a remarkable digression about forklifts and immigration. Picture someone weaving together a story combining workplace equipment operation with concerns about people arriving from unknown places, speaking incomprehensible languages. This unusual combination of topics creates a narrative that's challenging to follow, even for dedicated supporters. Speaking of supporters, their response to these communications presents a fascinating study in political loyalty. While many continue to defend every statement with religious-like devotion, there are subtle signs that some followers are finding it increasingly difficult to rationalize certain declarations. It's like watching someone try to convince themselves that an obviously unusual situation is completely normal. Looking ahead to future electoral implications, questions, these social media behaviors raise interesting questions about political communication strategies. Could these digital outbursts actually impact electoral prospects? It's like watching someone potentially tweet themselves into a corner, raising questions about the role of social media in modern political discourse. The entire situation serves as a compelling case study in contemporary political communication, where traditional boundaries of presidential behavior continue to be tested and redefined. It highlights how social media platforms can become both a megaphone and potentially a liability for political figures, especially when emotions run high and filters run low. When it comes to political entertainment these days, streaming services might want to take note. They're facing some serious competition from a rather unexpected source: social media feeds of certain political figures. What's particularly fascinating is how a carefully crafted advertisement from the Lincoln Project has managed to provoke such an intense reaction, seemingly more dramatic than responses to far more serious concerns. The situation presents an intriguing study in modern political behavior. Picture, if you will, the classic imagery of a matador's cape and a charging bull, but reimagine it in the digital age, where the cape is replaced by a screen displaying political content, and the reaction is played out across social media platforms rather than a traditional arena. What makes this particularly noteworthy is the context. Here we have someone who aspires to return to the highest office in the land, yet their responses to criticism mirror patterns we might expect from much younger individuals facing minor setbacks. Political analysts have raised valid concerns about the implications of having presidential candidates who express admiration for historical figures widely recognized for their atrocities. The metaphor that seems to capture this situation perfectly is akin to appointing a fox, albeit one with questionable cosmetic choices, to guard a henhouse. It raises important questions about judgment and leadership qualities. The observation that you'd be hard-pressed to find anything positive about Hitler seems like it should be an obvious statement rather than a point of contention in modern political discourse. Perhaps what we're witnessing is a compelling argument for reconsidering what qualities we prioritize in our political leadership. The suggestion that we might benefit from leadership that demonstrates more emotional maturity and measured responses to criticism doesn't seem unreasonable. After all, social media tantrums over political advertisements might make for entertaining viewing, but they raise serious questions about leadership capacity. The irony isn't lost that while streaming services invest heavily in creating compelling content, some of the most dramatic narratives are playing out in real time on social media platforms. It's as if we're watching a reality show that none of us signed up for, yet can't seem to look away from. The entertainment value might be high, but it comes with serious implications for democratic institutions and political discourse. This phenomenon has transformed political communication into something resembling performance art, except the stakes are considerably higher than mere entertainment. While it might provide material for late-night comedy shows, the underlying implications for democratic governance and political stability deserve serious consideration. The situation serves as a remarkable case study in how modern political discourse has evolved in the age of social media, where reactions to political advertisements can trigger cascading effects that reveal deeper truths about leadership qualities and democratic values.